Now we're going to chat about the big questions around nature restoration in Ireland. Who's the power to make change happen? What's slowing progress down? And whether Ireland's moving fast enough to meet its environmental obligations. The conversation comes ahead of the Changing Landscapes conference taking place today at the Falls Hotel in Ennistymon, organised by Hometree. The event's bringing together government representatives, landowners, investors, NGOs and community leaders to examine how Ireland can deliver restoration at the scale now required under the EU Nature Restoration Regulation. Joining us are Foghlú, the Engagement and Education Officer with Hometree, and the Minister of State at the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, Christopher O'Sullivan. And thanks to both of you for being with us. And Ray, the conference is asking a very direct question: who really holds the power over our land and nature restoration? Why is it important to frame the conversation that way? And what are you hoping to achieve with this conference?
Good to chat again, Alan, and thanks for having us on. I think it's a great question. You know, you've been a great supporter of us over the years, and you know about the conference, and we're always trying to find, constructive pathways, it was something that came up this morning in the discussion, farmers and landowners, normal people of rural Ireland own 80% of the country, and they're really the key stakeholders when it comes to restoring nature. And so the question is, a lot of them are very interested in doing so. We did a bit of work actually with Chris's department recently, where we held community conversations all over Ireland. We spoke to 13 different locations, marts, community centres. We went to youth centres. We went everywhere, and to ask people what do they want, for nature in their area. And there was just consensus across the board: young, old, urban, rural, left, right. Everybody kind of wants to see more nature restoration, farmers included. And so we're asking the question today: who has the power to make that happen? Some might assume, the government can do it, but we've had people like Chris and the director of the Forest Service, Barry Delaney, is in today, and you can see they know kind of what we need to do as well. They kind of like, I know where we have to get, but they don't always have the resources, the tools, the vehicles to get there. So they're the kind of questions we're asking today and trying to get answers for.
And Minister, the theme of the conference is the politics and power dynamics of restoration. In your view, what's currently preventing Ireland from restoring nature at the scale that's required?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to resources. I mean, probably over the decades, the policy has held us back. We had policies in terms of land use, could be farming, forestry, etc., that weren't very, I suppose, friendly or didn't coexist well with nature, and that's a policy point of view. That's a policy fault, the fault of farmers, not the fault of anyone in the community. That's the way we drove on intensely. But now we're kind of saying, okay, the stats are clearly telling us nature is in big trouble in this country. Habitats are in pretty dire conditions. So we need to absolutely flip that around. So I think the wheel is the ship is starting to turn for sure. That's, I guess, why and that I was given this role, knowing my passion for nature, and hopefully knowing that I had the interest and the passion to try and lever all of the or pull all of the levers of government of different state bodies to ensure that we can now start to see nature restoration happen at scale, and the events like today, where we have stakeholders from all different groups, all different parts of society, representing a whole vast range of people, having conversations and really kind of grown up conversations, not shying away from any sticky issues. This is how we plough way forward. But what's really blown me away in the few hours I've been here this morning is that, I've met people from all walks of life, and everyone is of the same view. Look, we need to restore nature, but their message to me as minister is, you have to fund this, minister, the government have to fund this. And that's the key question that's been posed. And we will fund it. So the next step is, we have the incredible work that's been done by the advisory committee, which is assisted by Ray and his team at Hometree. We have the recommendations, and the recommendations really couldn't be more straightforward. We fund nature restoration. We start on public land, so our national parks, like here in Clare, that would be somewhere like the Burn, which is already doing extraordinary work. And then finally, we support farmers, fishers and foresters. And that's key as well. So that's where the funding comes in. we need to incentivise landowners and farmers in particular to say, look, work with us to protect species and protect habitats, and you'll be rewarded financially for it. And trust me when I say that farmers are up for that. That's a kind of clear message.
Okay, and Ray, the Minister mentioned there that, you know, one of the questions is, will there be funding? He's said that there will be, and the conference promises tough questions and pragmatic ideas. I guess that's one of the questions answered, which no doubt you were pleased to hear. So what are some of the other difficult conversations you expect to emerge from today's event?
Yeah, I think the two ones that jump out at me, we had a session this morning on the law, you know, acknowledging that the law is critical. It can be an agent of change, but it can also be a blocker of change. And we heard from foresters and farmers and solicitors, you know, experts in these areas, people who are affected by complicated laws or contradictory laws, and people who set those laws. And there was just a broad acknowledgement across the morning that laws are essential, but they need to be fit for purpose, and there needs to be a simplification across the board. That's not a deregulation. That doesn't mean letting people off the hook with sharp practice or anything, but it just means that, like, at the point of engagement, be you a farmer, a fisherman, someone who's tasked with building roads, whatever it might be, that the system is navigable whilst protecting nature. So I think the legal thing is one of the key issues, and there's a panel starting in a minute that's going to be fantastic. We have Philip Boucher-Hayes emceeing the event, but we're going to actually put him into the seat and ask him a few questions in the next panel, because it's about knowledge, information, media, culture. You know, people like Chris are actually ultimately empowered by the electorate harassing them, essentially saying we want to see more for nature, we want to see cleaner rivers and whatever. And that only happens if we develop, or I should say maybe redevelop, a culture of nature connectedness. And we don't probably, so it's great that you're covering this morning, Alan. We probably don't hear or see enough about how critical it is to all of our lives on the radio, on the television. And this panel coming up is going to discuss why that is and how can we improve in those spaces.
Okay, and maybe just before I let you both go, I'll finish with you on that, Minister. I'm sure you don't mind being harassed in a certain way, but the conference is focusing on where influence matters, and, as Ray said, the role of media and others in accelerating action. Do you feel politicians don't respond quickly enough to environmental pressure? If not yourself, others?
I think, I mean, I would say that I think over the years there's been a perception that in terms of, you know, politicians by our nature, we think about elections and we think about how to, you know, obviously we think about those big questions about how we leave Ireland in a better place, but then you're always bound by the next election. And probably there hasn't been enough emphasis on the fact that actually, by the way, voters do want nature restoration. They do want to see nature restored. They have noticed the fact that nature has been disappearing, and this is important to them. And I think that's been missed. And I think part of my job is to convince colleagues, etc., that look, people do care about this, and there are votes in nature, which is a very kind of basic, simple way of putting it. But Clare is proof of that, Alan. Like, nature, farming for nature, really, this is the birthplace of that whole concept. To the point of view, my first visit to Clare, to the Burn, was last year. As Minister, I go to the nature reserves and national parks. And when I came to Clare, I won't say harassed, but certainly there was groups of farmers, would you believe, farmers coming to me saying, we need something like the Life Project back again. There was an incredible Life Project here called Burn Bio and Burn Life, where farmers were paid to manage the land for biodiversity. And they want to see a return of that in a significant way. I mean, I think when you have a situation where farmers are crying out for this, you've cracked it. And in Clare, that's happening. We just need to see that happen in greater scale.
Well, I have to say, today's Changing Landscapes conference sounds like a very worthwhile event. Some tough conversations, but worthwhile and perhaps long overdue conversations happening. My thanks to the Minister of State at the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, Christopher O'Sullivan, and Ray Foghlú, the Engagement and Education Officer at Ennistymon, based Hometree. The Changing Landscapes conference happening at the Falls Hotel in Ennistymon, currently running up until 5 p.m.